I never thought a simple wooden fence would spark a war. But in our neighborhood, nothing stays simple for long. I moved to Windy Ridge Estates last fall after taking a job as a zoning compliance officer for Clear County. I like the quiet out here, big yards, pine trees, and the kind of silence you only get when you're a little too far from the city for pizza delivery. My house sat on the edge of the neighborhood, next to a sloped patch of undeveloped land that technically belonged to me, though you wouldn't know it by how often folks wandered through it like it was a public park. At first, I didn't care. I figured it was neighborly to let things slide. But when I caught someone walking their dog just feet from my kitchen window, I realized it was time to clearly mark the line. That's how the fence idea started. The fence wasn't anything fancy, just a strong, 6-foot wooden boundary to clearly separate my property from the rest of the neighborhood. I filed my own permit, pulled my own maps, and double-checked every inch of legal boundaries before I sunk the first post. I wasn't doing anything out of line. But 2 days into construction, I heard the sharp clack of heels on my driveway and looked up to find her, Florence Hartridge, HOA board president. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat that looked more appropriate for a horse race and sunglasses that made her look like an off-brand Jackie O. Her lips were pinched like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Excuse me," she snapped, standing with arms folded at the base of my driveway. "What exactly are you building?" I explained it simply. Privacy fence. Within my property. Fully permitted. But Florence wasn't satisfied. She marched past the orange survey flags like they were imaginary and circled the fence posts, scoffing at my work. "This violates the visual harmony of Windy Ridge," she declared, as if she were quoting scripture. "No fencing is allowed without full board approval." I reminded her that my corner of the neighborhood wasn't even under the HOA's jurisdiction, that I'd bought the parcel before the expansion plan had been voted in. "I'm sorry, but you can't enforce bylaws where they don't apply," I said. She narrowed her eyes, muttered something about consulting the board, and spun on her heels. I hoped that was the end of it, but I underestimated Florence's flair for drama. The next morning, my fence had been defaced with green spray paint. Get rid of it. Community over chaos. I pulled security footage, clear as day. Florence's silhouette at 3:12 a.m. I filed a report, submitted the footage to the sheriff's office, and documented every last nail and bolt on that fence. I even printed an extra set of the county maps, complete with boundaries and certification stamps, just in case. But nothing prepared me for what came next. Saturday morning, I was tightening the final panel bolts when I saw Florence's silver Audi come flying down the road. She slammed the door, marched up the driveway, and dialed 911 on speaker for all to hear. Yes, I need to report a man impersonating a government official. He's building an illegal structure on our community green space. I didn't even bother replying. I just sipped my coffee and waited. Sure enough, a deputy sheriff rolled up 10 minutes later. When he saw me, he laughed. "Didn't expect to catch you committing crimes," he said. I showed him my ID, permits, maps, an inspection badge. Florence stood nearby, arms folded and fuming. The deputy reviewed everything. "Ma'am," he said slowly, turning to her, "this fence is legal, and you're currently trespassing." Her face turned crimson. She sputtered something about bylaws and harmony, then stomped off without another word. I figured that'd be the last of it. I was wrong. The next day, a letter appeared in my mailbox, sealed with the HOA's logo, demanding I cease and desist construction or face legal action. No code references, no signatures. Just empty threats in bold, angry font. I stapled a printed map to it, added a sticky note that said, "See you at the county office," and slipped it back in her box. That's when I decided to stop playing defense. I filed a public records request for HOA financials and emails. Took me 2 hours to find everything I needed. 5 clear violations of county code. One document showed the HOA paying Florence's nephew for landscaping services that were never rendered. I packaged everything and submitted it to the legal team at the county building. They called me within hours, laughing at the sheer brazenness of it all. "You got more receipts than a divorce lawyer," one of them joked. Meanwhile, Florence wasn't slowing down. She printed flyers warning neighbors about my rogue construction and even hired a teenager to wave a sign directing people to an emergency HOA meeting. I went, sat in the back. She ranted about property values, community cohesion, and unauthorized border structures. Then she claimed the county had ordered the fence be torn down. I nearly choked on my coffee. After the meeting, I introduced myself to one of the board members. Dennis. Showed him my badge. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Next morning, I caught 2 guys in yellow hard hats measuring the fence. Florence had apparently hired them to dismantle it. I walked out, pointed to the official boundary markers, and told them calmly that touching anything would make them personally liable. They left without a word. Florence just stood there, screaming at the air. That afternoon, another letter arrived, notice of intent to fine, signed by Florence. Still no legal code, just rage printed in Times New Roman. I made copies and walked them over to the county's legal office. By then, the team had opened a full investigation. Neighbors started showing their support. One brought lemonade. Another dropped off a cartoon they'd drawn of Florence yelling at a tree. I added solar lights to the fence and a wooden sign that said, "Boundary of Reason." Florence reported me to wildlife control, claimed the lights disturbed migratory birds. She reported my wheelbarrow as an abandoned trailer, then tried to trigger a surprise inspection, except my coworker Doug showed up. We walked the property, laughed over coffee, and checked every box twice. That night, Florence called another emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, but someone handed me a flyer labeling my home a hostile parcel. I printed a dozen county-certified maps, hand-delivered them to every house, and watched the neighborhood quietly turn on her. When the next meeting came, Florence barged in with 3 binders, shouting about infiltration. The board let her rant. Then they invited me to speak. I stood, presented my permits, my documents, and finally, a recording. One of her own board members had leaked audio of Florence instructing others to ignore facts and make him regret this. The room fell silent. Florence's voice on tape was undeniable. Sandra, the vice president, moved for removal. The vote was unanimous. Florence tried to leave, tripped on the projector cord, and stormed out as the board thanked me for helping expose months, maybe years of shady behavior. A few days later, the county mailed me a letter thanking me for assisting in their audit. Turns out, Florence had been billing HOA funds for everything from gift baskets to birthday cakes for her granddaughter. She's now facing ethics charges, fines for false reporting, and public censure. Sandra reached out, asked me to speak at the next board meeting about homeowner rights. I agreed. Not for revenge, but for clarity. So no one else would have to deal with this nonsense again. Florence vanished after that. Moved. Maybe. Or just hiding behind closed blinds. Either way, the fence still stands. Neighbors greet each other again. Kids ride their bikes past my sign and laugh. The fight wasn't just about wood and nails. It was about principle. And when push came to shove, I had the one thing Florence didn't: the truth.